In the last lesson, we listened to a chapter from Wish Lanterns by Alec Ash. In that chapter, we met Xiao Xiao, a girl who lives in rural China, and we heard about her experiences at school and in her home life. We found out that Xiao Xiao's parents migrated for work, which meant that she didn't see her mother at one point for half a year. In this lesson, we're going to have a look at those left behind children. We're going to have a look at migration, and we will also have a look at the impact of left behind children on the country as well as on the economy of China. First, let's look at the word migration. If you migrate somewhere, if you look at those birds migrate, don't they? If you migrate, it means you move from one place to another. The word actually comes from the Latin migrare, which means to move. So you migrate on a regular basis. If you think about a school day, when the bell goes for break, you migrate from your homeroom to the playground or to the field or to the 3G pitch or to the tennis courts. So migration means moving from one place to another. You will have heard people talking about, or you may have talked about yourself, the concept of immigration or maybe emigration. So immigration, if you have an immigrant you will recognise as somebody who has moved to a country. But what's interesting is the word immigrant and immigration literally means to move in. And that's because the prefix at the start of immigration, im, means in. Equally, there is the word you might not hear very often, which is to emigrate. And you tend to use the word emigre when you're talking about somebody who has emigrated. And emigrate, the prefix em, means out, because it links into, it's the same as the prefix x. So if you have exit, an entrance, it's the same principle. In and x, in and out. So if you look at that little person with the two arrows, if you're an individual who is leaving your own country to go and live somewhere else, say I moved tomorrow to Norway, I would call myself an emigrant. I would say I am emigrating to Norway. I am moving out of England. I am emigrating. I am moving out of England. I would not call myself an immigrant, but who would call me an immigrant? Who would call me an immigrant? What you should be thinking is the Norwegians, because to me, I am emigrating, I am moving, migrating out. The Norwegians would see me as migrating, moving in. So an immigrant is the same thing as somebody who is emigrating. It's the same thing. It's just all about your perception. I would see myself as moving out of a country that I was born in. Other people would see me as moving into a country that they were born in. So migration means to move. Two more words that we need to understand before we can do the lesson are urban and rural. Urban relates to cities, to towns, to busy industrial areas where you have lots of people living. So cities, towns, big centres, the metropolis, comes from the Latin urbis, which meant city. So that's what urban means. An urban place would be somewhere like London or Nottingham or Norwich. Rural relates to places that are not urban, and it's associated with the countryside. So the word rural is associated with the countryside. It means not urban. If you are in a rural area, you are in somewhere like Aylsham, like Erpingham, somewhere where there is, interestingly enough, room, which is where the word rural comes from. It comes from the same root, rue, R-E-U-E, which is where we get the word room from. And rural literally means there is room. So if you think about, particularly in England, areas of countryside, rural areas, we have lots of fields, you've got lots of space, got lots of room. So that's urban versus rural. So your first question to answer, just in your heads this one, because the next slide follows on. Why do you think people in different countries might migrate? Why might people migrate, move from rural areas to urban areas? Why might people in different countries who live in rural areas, who live in the countryside, why would they move to urban areas? Have a think about why that might be. So hopefully one of the thoughts that came to your mind was people might move from rural areas to urban areas to find work. If you find work, then you can earn money to bring back for your family. This is the case in many parts of rural China. So we'll have a look at the geography of China in a moment. But what you need to know first is that nearly a quarter, 1 in 4 children in rural areas of China, so parts of the countryside, are left behind as their parents migrate to urban areas to work. So nearly a quarter of children are left behind in the rural areas in the countryside as their parents migrate to the cities to work. 43% of Chinese households have at least one migrant worker. So it's not always mum and dad who go, sometimes it's just mum or just dad. But 43%, nearly half of Chinese households have at least one migrant worker. While the parents migrate, while they move to find work in the cities, the children in these families are left with other family members or friends. So some children live with their grandparents, some children live with friends, some children live with other family members. So this is the situation right now in rural China. So let's have a look at this infographic, which gives us some information about the left behind children. This is a couple of years old and the number's actually gone up, but at the time of writing 2 years ago, there were 61 million children in China who can be classified as left behind. So there are 61 million children living with one or none of their parents. This is now closer to 63 million in 2020, just the end of last year. Just to put that into perspective, in the UK there are around 66 million people in the UK. So there is an equivalent picture for you. This is the amount of people we're talking about, the amount of children we're talking about. So if you have a look at the pie chart on the right, those 61 million children, 75% of them, so 3/4 of those 61 million children, see their parents once a year, one occasion. 20% of those 61 million see their parents twice a year or more. And there are 5% who see their parents every 2 years or less often. So this is the situation. If you think back to Xiao Xiao from the last lesson in the chapter from Wish Lantern, she saw her mother infrequently, and at one point she hadn't seen her for half a year. But given this presentation, Xiao Xiao seems one of the almost lucky ones, could you say? At the bottom there you can see an explanation of who cares for these children. So just over half live with one parent, 33% live with grandparents, 11% live with others, and 3% live alone. So that 3% looks small until you realise that it means that 2.1 million people, children, live alone. 2.1 million children live alone. Over half live with one parent. Now, those of us in single parent families, I'm one myself, will know the difficulties associated with being in a family with one parent. The remainder don't live with either parent. So that's a little overview for you to digest and have a think about, ready to answer the following question. I would like you to have a think about what effect this situation might have on the children of rural China. Now, in your answer, I want you to think deeply about a number of different things. I want you to think about, firstly, what effect migration of parents would have on the children left behind by their parents. I want you to try and think of as many ways that you can to explain the possible impact on their day-to-day life of the children. I also want you to consider the impact on the parents. I want you to think about what impact migration might have on the parents. I'd also like you to think about the impact that migration might have on the people who are living with the children, on schools, and on local communities. So have a think about the potential impact of this migration on the children, the parents, the families, and the communities of rural China. If you could write your answer either on paper and take a photo and send it in, or you can complete the form that is on your Google Classroom, that would be ace. Now, there's one further term that we need to understand in order to assess the impact of migration in a different way, and that word is economy. You will probably have heard this word used a lot in recent weeks, and a lot of you will know what it means. I'll be honest, I wasn't 100% sure about the economy and what it was all about until I was probably at university. So I thought I'd just have a little look at what it actually means when people talk about the economy and the effect on the economy, what that actually means. So first of all, the word economy comes from the Greek language, and it means literally to manage a house. It's household management. So the house, oikos, and manage, nemein, so oikos nemein, economy. So this is how the word is developed, but it originally referred to the idea of managing a household. So money coming in, money going out. The economy of a country incorporates three things. You've got production, consumption, and trade. So production is referring to the things that a country produces, and this can be resources, it can be natural resources, it can be services as well. Consumption refers to the consumer. So if you think about what you might have studied in business and enterprise, the idea of supply and demand, what's produced is then consumed, what's traded into the country is also consumed. Trade, the final part of the economy, is to do with interactions with other economies. So this is when you would trade goods, trade services with other people. So they're the three main elements of the economy of a particular place. So an economy runs on the basis of the people within it that participate in that economy. So at the top, you've got a list of all the people that you could say participate in these processes of production, consumption, and trade. You've got families, so people like you and I, employers, corporations, governments, and the monarchy. So everybody in a country has some part to play in the economy. At the bottom of the slide, you can see a list of things that influence the decisions and choices that happen in a particular place to drive that economy. So an economy in one country will never be the same as the economy in another one, because economies are influenced by not just those people at the top, but also at the bottom. Economies are influenced by the culture of the country in which the economy operates. They're influenced by laws that have been put in place to make that economy run. They are influenced by history. They are influenced by geography. In this particular unit, we are focusing on history and geography. We're looking at how geography influences the decisions made in certain countries and how that then influences the people within those countries. So where we looked at Xiao Xiao's story, we're going to start investigating how Xiao Xiao's story is linked to not just the geography of China, but also the economy of China and the history behind that economy. Let's look at the geography first of all. So China, if you were to have a look at it on a map, you can see a map in the last video of China itself, but in comparison with the rest of the world, it's the fourth biggest country in the world. China has 100 cities that have over 1 million people in them. So in each of those cities, there are over 1 million people. We in the UK have one city like this, and that is London. So China has 100 cities that are 1 million or more people, have 1 million or more people within them. China has 1.4 billion people in its population, which is approximately 18% of the world's entire population. Just to put that into perspective, in the UK we are 0.9% of the world population. Size-wise, to drive from the northernmost tip to the southernmost tip of China would take you 53 hours in a car, driving at normal speed limits. That's the equivalent, pretty much, of going from, say, Cornwall to Scotland and back twice. Xinjiang, one of the regions that were mentioned in Xiao Xiao's story, Xinjiang would fit 7 United Kingdoms inside it. So that's one of the regions in China, and that alone would fit 7 United Kingdoms inside it. So the geography of China, important to understand. In the pictures there, you've got 2 photographs that have been taken from above the country. So in the top one, you can see obviously one of the rural parts of the country, and in the bottom picture you can see that's actually Shanghai. So you can see an example of a very urban area versus a very rural area. So this is the geography that the Chinese are having to mitigate. They are having to understand and work around in order to build their economy. So your next question to do either on paper or on the Google form is, what effect might the geography of China have on its economy? What effect might the geography of China have on its economy? So you've got the fact that it's very large. You've got the idea of there being very different types of environments. You've got rural areas versus very urban areas. You have the idea of there being lots of migrating parents people that are migrating from one place to another to find work. How might the migrating parents influence the economy of China? So the last little question at the bottom of your form is, can you guess what this picture is referring to? This is what we're going to look at next lesson. I want you to see if you can guess what this picture is showing you. Next lesson, I'm going to tell you all about it, and it blew my mind, so I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. Well done. See you next lesson.